IAB Chair, and I'm joined by Alvaro Rotana, who is chairing this session with me. All right. We're going to get started now. First, as usual, we do have the note well, and although this is not a session in which we're going to be discussing a lot of technical document topics, all of these conditions still apply, so please do make sure you're familiar with the conditions for participating in the IETF. All right, so we are at IAB Open. If you haven't been to this before, we want to kind of explain what are we doing here. So the IAB, the Internet Architecture Board, as a group, we have this meeting to have a lot of open discussion about what the IAB is working on and to get feedback and communication with the whole IETF community. So this is a session where we talk about the current IAB activities, any of the technical or architectural topics we're working on in programs and workshops and documents. And we also talk a lot about the relationships to other standards organizations that we have through liaisons. And hopefully this is a way that we can increase the visibility of what the IAB is doing, get feedback on that, and shape what we should continue to be doing going forward. Besides attending IAB Open, which you are already doing, if you want to engage with IAB, you're always welcome to send email to the IAB@iab.org list. It includes all of the IAB members as well as many other people who work with the IAB and who attend IAB meetings regularly. So just be aware of that as you are sending email to the IAB. We also have a list for technical and architectural discussion, which is the Architecture Discuss list. And everyone is welcome to join that and bring up discussions and topics that they have that are architectural in nature. And then if you have questions about liaison work specifically, you can please email the liaison coordinators at liaisoncoordination@iab.org if you have any questions there. Okay, so this time at IETF 122, we are having 2 sessions of IAB Open. So this is the first one where we're going to go through some of our workshop updates, document updates, and talk about some liaisons. There is also going to be a second session tomorrow, and I'll let Alvaro talk about that.
Sure, thanks. So as Tommy said, we're having a second session tomorrow. It is at the same time and in the same place as this one. The session tomorrow is focused on WSIS plus 20. WSIS, which took me a while to learn how to say WSIS, is the World Summit on the Information Society. It is a United Nations effort, multi-stakeholder effort that started 20 years ago. So that's why the plus 20. This year in July, there will be a review of action items and action lines that were defined 20 years ago in something that's called the Tunis Agenda. So this is important to the IETF because part of what was set there is the importance of the multi-stakeholder model of internet governance, where the technical community, us, have an important part to play in how the internet evolves, of course. So tomorrow we're going to get a little bit more background. As you can see in the agenda, we're going to have a perspective from the government, and from a government, in this case the Australian government, and Mark is also going to talk about the role of the IETF. We should have enough time for questions and answers at the end.
Great, so if you're interested in that, please do join us tomorrow, and we look forward to a good discussion then. So going through some of the other IAB activities, here are just some updates on the IAB stream documents we have. So we recently have published RFC 9707, which is one of our workshop reports from the bias workshop. So please take a read of that if you want to hear about what happened at that workshop. And we also have 2 other workshop reports that are going through the review process. They have been published, one on the AI control workshop and the other on the NEMOPS workshop, which we will be hearing more about very soon from Dhruv. So these are both in draft form. If you attended these workshops and you want to review them, please do so. If you are interested in what happened to these workshops and you want to read the reports, you can also please feel free to make any comments that can go into the final RFCs for these. Okay. One of the other things that the IAB is responsible for is to help shepherd new work coming into the IETF. And so for the past couple meetings, we've been running a help desk for new work. So if people have questions about how to best bring new work into the IETF, they can chat with a couple IAB members and get some tips, advice, and we can help connect you with the right people, be that area directors or others. So we're going to be running 2 slots of this help desk, one on the second session tomorrow on Tuesday, and one on Thursday morning. That'll be near the IETF registration. So if you have questions around some new work ideas you have, please join us there. All right. We also, within IAB, run technical programs, which are groups that kind of dive into particular topics and try to either work on documents or start up work in workshops or other venues. One of these is e-impact. Suresh, did you want to maybe speak to the slide a little bit since it's your update?
Sure, thanks. Yari is also here and he can also chime in. So Suresh Krishnan. So we started a design team to work on architectural considerations. So we had like a set of meetings. So we had like about 7 meetings before this thing, and we have a 0-0 draft out that's like provided there. And we will present this, like Yari and I, at a sustainability proposed research group. So I don't know, at Sustain PRG, like if we can call it that. And we'd love for comments from people to like what to add, what to delete, like in there. And the goal of that is also to like kind of use this to like progress this document and figure out like how to wind down the program after. So we managed to achieve quite a bit, like with the Green Working Group getting kicked off and Sustain RG. A lot of the work is done, so we just kind of wanted to see what else is left to come up. Yari, you want to add anything? Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yes.
Well,
I forgot to say, like Mark would also join us as like a lead for the program, Mark Nottingham. So welcome, Mark. Thanks.
Good. All right. Our other technical program is EDM on evolvability, deployability, and maintainability. This program has developed a couple different RFCs previously. There's one document that is still ongoing that is being discussed around the patterns we see in protocols of greasing and giving guidance on how greasing can be used broadly across protocols. This is something that we plan to adopt for the IAB stream. The group has been quiet. People have had other things going on. We're not meeting this week, but we do plan to have more activity in the coming months. And David Skonanski has been one of the program leads with me for a while, and now as he is stepping down off of the IAB, he will no longer be leading the program, and Jana and Warren have volunteered to step up and help lead that. So please welcome them. And if you're interested in this topic, join our calls in the future. Okay. And so now we're going to jump into a review of the NEMOPS workshop. Do you want me to share?
Hi everyone, so I'll give a rundown of an IAB workshop that we did in December. This report was developed by Wes and I. Next slide, please. So we had a workshop 22 years ago. Next slide. In that workshop, it led to, okay, I'll continue talking. So, network management. This topic, IAB did a workshop back in 22 years ago. That workshop was quite consequential. It led to a lot of development in network management space, a lot of new work related to NetConf, Yang, various different developments happened. And in fact, that RFC 3535, which was the workshop report, is well referenced in the network management community as one of the key outputs. So it was time for us to relook. Like 22 years have passed. Where are we with the space? What's working? Have we met the requirements that we identified 22 years ago? Are there requirements which are completely brand new that we kind of missed? And it's the networks have changed, the way we operate our networks have changed. So it's a time for us to relook at the network management again. So with that workshop, one of the key things we also did identify was that we need to reach out to the operator community more. We can't just rely on, we have folks from operator community who participate in IETF, but that's a small set. There are a lot more people who are not here, and it's important that via this workshop, we reach out to them. So as a part of the workshop itself, we make sure that our outreach activities is part of the workshop program. We reached out to various operator communities like Nanog, like RIPE, LACNIC, AutoCon, and asked them to come participate in the workshop. If they cannot participate, maybe take part in a survey. We have a mailing list. Come and send your requirements to the mailing list. Come and talk to the program committee. Just engage with us a little bit more so that this workshop could be successful. And even after the workshop, we went back to the same communities and still reaching with our output that this is what the workshop discussed, but this is just the starting point of our discussion. And there is still need for further engagement with the community. And of course, the work happens in the district. Perfect. So I think I covered that. Next slide, please. That's our program committee. So thanking them for helping out in running the PC. I was co-chair with Wes, and we had members from the IAB as well as in the ops community helping with running the program. Next slide. This was our objective. The main objective was to look back at the previous workshop, identify what are the new operational barriers, explore new requirements, and from the workshop point of view, come up with a plan of action and recommendation that we can share with the community, and which is what we are doing right now. All our material is available on Data Tracker, the position papers, the slides, the recordings of the workshop. So please go and review them in more detail there. Next slide. Okay, I covered that. Next slide. A very interesting set of data that we got from our operator surveys. Sometimes when we are working on IETF work, we are too deep into the protocol, but it's always good to go back to the community and say who is using what. And that was quite surprising. We have done so much work with NetConf, so much work with Yang, but when you do surveys, we still lose out to CLI and still lose out to SNMP. Something that we identified 20 years ago is not the right direction. So there is a lot of our legacy stuff, lots of old protocol, non-model driven work still out there. So all this are also attached in the presentation slide. So you can look at the backup and look through some of the interesting results that we got from our survey as well, which was very fundamental for the workshop program committee on how do we frame the discussion during the workshop itself. Next slide. This is our agenda. We got 20 position papers from 53 authors, 16 expression of interest. So this was a pretty good, well-attended 3-day workshop. One thing which was kind of difficult for us to how to break things down into days so that we can have a discussion that made sense. We decided to look to divide the days into past, present, and future, have a look back of where we are, where we started, what's working well, what's not, what are the list of new problems and requirements, that was day 2, and what are the future solutions, and finally, what can we conclude on, that was our day 3. Next slide. So let's start with day 1. Again, a disclaimer, I'm just going to give a very quick rundown. Lots of details are there in the workshop report or also in the position paper submitted by our workshop participants. So for more information, please refer there. This is to just give a very quick intro of what was discussed. So we had Jürgen, who was the author of the previous workshop report, RFC 3535, who went over the experience of how that workshop went and what all are the main changes that happen in the ops community and what are the key innovations that the community did, as well as looking back, what's the future direction. And some 4 key aspects that Jürgen identified was network management needs to be more declarative, more composable, reproducible, verifiable. So this was a very good paper from Jürgen. So people who are interested, go read up on it and how he breaks down these 4 key characteristics for a future for network management for configuration. DT, Deutsche Telekom, shared that yes, we have been using Yang, we have been using NetConf, it works well when we are doing the configuration, but we have various challenges. And some of the challenges were highlighted, especially with respect to mapping things between different models, between higher level orchestration system to device model. How do we do this kind of mapping is becoming a challenging in the overall ecosystem, as well as lack of open source, lack of tooling was identified as one of the key issues that the operator face when they want to move to the latest network management solution. We had a very interesting look back in history from Wes, from Net SNMP, and how a tool which was kind of simple and usable, but still very, very widely deployed, and how our current set of network management protocols and models fail one of the key requirements that RFC 3535 identified, which is ease of use. So we have added a lot of features. Our protocols can do things. Yang model is amazing, but it's pretty difficult to use. And that's something that we need to take account of. Another interesting thing was that 20 years ago, IoT was not there. And how set of protocols that, or the ecosystem that we developed within the IETF was very easy to use in IoT space, and with the development of various new protocols, new data mechanism like CBOR, CoreConf, and it was easy for us to map various innovations that we have done in the network management space into IoT. So this is, in fact, one of the success criteria of the work that IETF has done. Next slide. We also had Rob from Google /OpenConfig, who had given us these thoughts to the IETF community in the past. So it was good to get like a better understanding of them, that how the standard process that we have in the IETF didn't work that well for in the network management space, and why they decided that they need to start OpenConfig and do the OpenConfig specification outside of IETF. And what are the key requirements that they have? Iterating faster, not thinking of Yang model within one working group, one feature, but looking at how it interacts with the whole system, which we do realize that we don't do as well compared to other folks. Because within our working group system, we are focusing on one key problem that we are solving there, rather than thinking of the overall system. As well as how can we focus on scalability? How can we make sure that the things that we are developing is deployable? Those were the key points that were highlighted by Rob, and they were well taken by the workshop participant that yes, this is something that's true. The discussion brought up a lot of interesting things. That is, we have Yang models, but since Yang models doesn't cover everything, they doesn't have a full coverage, you have to rely on CLI, you have to rely on screen scraping. So your solutions are always more complex because you are relying on multiple techniques to do that. Incorporating the ideas that we have that, yes, let's try to iterate faster via Yang or via our network management protocols. But how do we balance things? How do we make sure that we respect the consensus process that we have in the IETF? At the same time, we come up with our models faster. Lack of tooling. I think this was identified by many people as one of the key issues that we have. We have worked on Yang, we have worked on Yang Push, but we don't have good open source or easy to use tools. Something which we realize that maybe IETF doesn't have a direct involvement in, But this is something that within the ops community, we need to highlight that how can, via hackathons, via other ways, we come up with easy tooling so that operators who are interested in it are able to start using them much more easily. Performance issues, scalability, and in general, transitioning to model-driven technique, the learning curve that is required was highlighted by many folks in the discussion. Next slide. Yes, yes. I think this is mostly covered. Let's move on to the present part. We had focus on, like, initially the focus was network configuration. That's what NetConf is. But for things to be fully usable, the monitoring and validating of our configuration is one of the key requirements. So our next step in the network management community is a focus more on monitoring aspects, on observability, and making sure that we are able to answer to same requirements from our community as well. There is a document in NMOPS which is collecting all these new requirements. So many of the workshop discussions also led to a revision in that document, and that's the place for people to reach out to if they have brand new requirements that have been captured there. Next slide. Some of the issues that were highlighted, transitioning is very hard. We saw that, like, every time we come up with a new technology, the famous example, IPv6, and how we forget that how we are going to transition to it. And here also many people identified that transitioning to YANG remains a challenge. We need easier ways to identify how to do that. There is huge divergence in what's there in the standard versus what is deployed and what's the vendors are doing, because vendors have their own features. There is a lot of divergence, and that's leading to a lot of complexity in the system as well. Mapping of models remains to be a major issue, and open source reference implementation is something that many folks identify as a key mistake. Next slide. Compliance and interoperability, something that we don't do, but folks said that that's kind of important at this stage if the YANG models and network management has to succeed, that we need to make sure that there is interoperability, there are multiple implementations before things get finalized, which is something that some working groups do. IDR, for instance, have that requirement, but is this something that makes sense for network management? That's an open question. Next slide. In the day 3, it was more about future ideas, knowledge graph, RDF, which was very interesting. Many folks gave us clear ideas, like Kent said that now the focus should be on RESTconf, on JSON, on YANG push, and something that was discussed quite widely, that is off-box data model and protocol adapters. So far, we have focused on doing YANG models for our devices, but we know that there are device models, native model, open config model, various complexities. But what if there is a way for us to map them via tooling? So off-box data model and protocol adapters was something as a future direction that was discussed widely. Next slide. And I'll actually jump to the key aspects. I think that's most important. Yes, this one. So finally, what we did was at the final day is let's come to some conclusion. We had a pretty good discussion. There was very wide, but as a group, what are the set of things that the workshop participant can agree on? And we did some live editing and came up with these conclusions that we broke it down to ecosystem conclusions. So what were those? We kind of failed ease of use, I think, ease of use as a requirement. Our ecosystem is extremely fragmented. The documentations is kind of missing, and it's becoming a bottleneck for people to actually deploy the stuff that we are working on. The transitioning is hard. The model-driven has been successful for where people have used it. So people who have deployed NetConf and are using YANG are happy. So they also worry that don't break the system. It's working. So whatever you develop, whatever issues that you have identified, there's no need to completely revolutionize the thing, but build on what's already working. And more easy tools was identified as one of the requirements. Next slide. For protocol monitoring, asking for full coverage, people agreed that polling-based systems are still being used. We want push, but it exists. SNMP is still being used there. We also identified that something that we did not reach conclusion on, and that's also captured in the workshop report. Next slide. Modeling conclusions. Our Yang models can become too complex. That's everybody's agreeing on that this is a problem, but something that we can't do. It's not Yang's fault that's complex. Our protocols are complex. There are way too many knobs to play around. That's the reality. Multi-vendor compatibility support is required. Focus on vendor-specific features because they exist, and we need to make sure that whichever way we do standards work, it allows for vendor-specific things to evolve as well, and with easy use rather than it becoming very complicated. Service level modeling, we do that for L3SM, L2SM, but that's direction that we need to continue to grow. Make sure that configurations that we do are verifiable so that the full circle can happen with respect to Yang modeling. I think this next slide, I'm coming to a conclusion.
We have two people in line.
Yes. Rapid model development is needed. We need to agree on minimal set of features within the working group rather than just pile on feature. That becomes too complicated to deploy. More standardization focus should be on scalability, and whatever enhancement that we do needs to be backed up by real use case, by operator inputs, rather than just the features which are nice to have. Final slide. Yes. Right. So final message, IAB workshops are the starting point of discussion. They are not the end of the discussion. We had the workshop, but the real work has to happen now. So please come, participate, look at the workshop report, participate in NMOps and Ops area and other places if this is of your interest. The requirements is being worked on in NMOps working group already. It's part of their charter item. And come and participate. Questions?
Dejan Bogdanovic. I couldn't help myself. So both NetConf and Yang and RESTConf are based on a technology that has been developed in 96, 97. Every time when we are developing a model, we decide to boil the ocean. We cannot say this is the minimum core that will work for a model and then add features what are needed on the side. Unless we satisfy every single little requirement, it will just continue. We did a routing model. It took us 7 years to do that. Nobody's using it. It is just too complex. It does not help any vendor, and the vendors are just skipping that and asking the operators what they want directly. We developed so many models without any operator input. I'm very happy to see that we have now a working group where the operators are participating and presenting their problems and also saying, this is how we are using it, where we could see the improvements. But why don't we look into the modern software development techniques and try to apply them into our area? Why do we have to reinvent the wheel that is just about 15 years too late?
Agree. There were a lot of people in the workshop who brought up the same point, and the idea of using GitHub, using software development process within our standard making process. How do we do that? There is a need for doing process experimentation, and I hope there are proposals out there for that.
Hey, Rich, if I can just, so it is not just using GitHub and GitLab and the versioning systems. It is more about creating modular software. It is about creating testing frameworks. You have so many testing frameworks for software. There isn't a proper testing framework for network management. In software, I can update my code multiple times a day. You just said the operator is saying, "Oh, it's working, don't touch it." There's a reason. If you had a testing framework, you could test and deploy. But everything is so complicated. Everything takes such a long time because we have so much baggage in the back, plus our processes are too heavy that we can make the progress.
Thank you. Andrew.
Hi. Hi. Sorry, Andrew Campling speaking, network management enthusiast. Just building on Dean's comment first, I think perhaps we ought to come up with a new concept of a minimum viable protocol, and which maybe will be a good approach for the future rather than having the perfect protocol in all cases. More generally, I think that was a really rich sort of presentation with lots of good learnings, very grounded in practical experience. How do we get a lot more network operators here, whether they're public network operators or enterprises, because we would have probably got better answers in the first place if they'd sort of been involved from the outset rather than you having to have a workshop for them. So I think that diversity of participation is really important. And that presentation sort of proved why it's so valuable.
Yeah.
So I think that's something we need to think about.
Agree.
All right. Thank you, Drew.
Sorry for taking a little extra.
No, it's good. It's clearly a lot to discuss and look forward to the continued discussion and impact of this. All right, so we're going to move on to the liaison RFC updates. I'm going to quickly check to see if the sharing slides here works. No, it does not. I'm going to have to share my screen again. Let's do this.
Okay, I just start.
Yeah, you go.
Yeah, hi, I'm Mia Kulivin. I'm on the IAB.
And I
Hi,
hear-
Suresh Krishnan also from the IAB. So we have like 2 documents here. So we are both presenting today.
And we are actually both liaison coordinators in the IAB together with Chin. I'm not sure he's here, but yeah. Okay, Chin Wu. So we told you last time already that we started updating these documents. We have 2 documents that define our liaison process. One is talking about how to handle liaison statements, and the other one is how to handle or how to create liaison relationships. You can go on to the next slide, if you can. Yeah. So why are we doing this? First of all, there's some information which is kind of a little bit outdated. We moved on, we changed our handling, so we want to update them. But then we also get a lot of questions around when to send a liaison, when to have a formal relationship. And these are somehow these drafts, but not as clear as they maybe should be. So we're trying to actually take our experience and make these things more clear for the future. And then specifically for 4053, which is about how to handle liaison statements, there's a lot of in detailed information about how our tooling works, which really doesn't have to be in an RFC, so we're removing that part completely. Next. Yeah, so just very quickly on the process, these are BCP documents, so they are not IAB documents. They actually have to go through the full IETF consensus process. But the way we usually do that is we first adapt them on the IAB, we work on them, and when they're ready, we hand them over to the ISG, run the IETF last call, and then they will be published as BCP. So that's the plan here. Right now, we just published the very first 0.0 version for these 2 drafts. So we are in the phase where we're really looking for feedback and make sure that the community is aware that we're doing this, but also that the community understands better how liaisons are working and understands that we're doing some changes or updates here. Next. Okay, so as I just said, we published a 0.0 version for both of these drafts, for both of these BIS documents, and I'm kind of the main editor for 53, so I go through some of the changes here. But this is more for information, but if you have questions, we can also discuss them now, but otherwise you can look at the slides and then provide us feedback later as well. So on the high level, as I said, a lot of the changes so far is really removing all the detailed stuff about tools, so this document is now much shorter. And I think we're also not completely done with that, so I'm still working on that, but I removed a lot of text. This includes also already some clarification, smaller changes. We moved a whole section over from 4052 to this document because that's where it belongs. Next slide. This is like not showing anything anymore.
She thinks I'm sharing.
Can I just look at your screen?
Sure.
So if you look at the slides yourself, if you retrieve them from data tracker, okay. Okay. So yeah, this is one of the clarifications on the left side is basically saying the sentence is already saying everybody can send us a liaison statement, no matter if we have a formal relationship or not. It's just like saying it the awkward way around. So this is what we want to say. Everybody can send us a liaison statement. You don't need a formal relationship. You can just send us a liaison statement if you want. This is open for everybody. And then there is a whole thing about phrasing about being obligated to reply, which says like kind of, if we have a formal liaison arrangement, then you are obligated to reply. I mean, you're kind of never obligated to reply, because sometimes we just get liaison statements for information, you read them, you understand them, and that's it. You don't have to send a reply. But what's really important is that if we have a liaison manager, the liaison manager needs to make sure that the communication works and they understand when we send a reply or when we don't send a reply. So that was just clarifications. This is, which you can't read probably, but you can look at the data tracker. This is kind of how our tooling looks right now. It has a bunch of fields there, and they sometimes lead to confusion. We have something like the from contact, we have the technical contact, we have the response contact, and whatever. So what we're also changing is trying to simplify this and make it more clear which information to put in which field, which you can see in the next slide. Potentially. So basically we only have like, we try to have only two groups of contact information. One is like, who is this from, which group, and what are the email addresses connected to this group. This includes everybody, the chairs, the ADs, the liaison contacts, the experts, and then who to send this to, and then this is all the addresses from the other organization we are sending this to. So we try to simplify that, but look at the details in the draft, and hopefully the tooling will change as well at some point. Next. Okay, and this is another change I quickly want to mention. We removed this purpose for comment, because when you look at the record, it's very rarely used and it's not clear what the difference is. So now we only have like these two things. One is for information, which like is without any action, and the other one is for action. So you're actually respecting a reply. That's what you need. Okay, I think that is, this is maybe an important point. We added a completely new section on recording liaison statements, because at the end, that's one of the really important properties of liaison statements. It's something formal that we record in our system. It's publicly available. Everybody can see that you formally sent this to us and we know that we received it. And that's kind of one of the values of having this whole system, to actually record this and make this available and publicly visible. And so that's also clarified in the document now. Next.
Okay, thank you. So this is the sister document of 4053. So this describes the higher level bits of that. Like that's about really sending and receiving. This is about how we set up relationship and why we do it. And again, it was like quite a bit of out of date, like as Miria said. And generally the idea of this is to say like, hey, the IAB acts in the interest of IETF, and we set up liaison relationship when one is needed. And there's like big emphasis on informal communication. So like it was kind of still in the older document too, but we are emphasizing that informal communication and common participation is preferred to have better outcomes. But for liaison relationship can be set formally when there's a need to do that, right? And one more thing that's added is that the liaison statements don't have any special standing in the IETF process. So if something comes in through a liaison statement or through an email that somebody sent on a list, it's treated like similarly, which may or may not be the case in other organizations where the liaison statements may have like a better, I would say, reception, right? Like than somebody randomly sending something. So that's something we kind of done it. And like you also simplify some of the things that are duplicated between this 4052 and 4053. So as Miria said, like there's some sections we completely removed from this because it was duplicate to stuff that should be in 4053 and was also in 4053. So like we kind of removed all those things and cleaned them up. Next slide. And so one thing that comes up a lot is like the IETF doesn't require a liaison relationship in almost all cases, right? Like all the documents we do are open. Anybody is free to participate in the process, like just sign up on the list and do something or participate remotely. And most of the time we are creating a liaison relationship when it's needed, mostly from the other organization. Next slide. So the people say like, okay, when do we need a formal liaison relationship, right? Like we try to put some kind of checklist. So this is something that has been asked of us to say like, hey, give us like some set of things where you would consider forming one, right? And we did put in a couple of pieces where we think it's useful to have a relationship. And most of this is not an exclusive list, so I'm sure there's like other things that could come up here. But I think it's like one of the things is that some organizations, the documents either cost money or they have like they're behind like some kind of paywall, or like, you know, they require membership to participate. And for IETF people to get access to it, we need a formal relationship. I think Bob is here, and we kind of went through this with like some of the marine use of IPv6, right, where the documents are like, you know, significantly priced, and we need to get access to it. And sometimes it's we need, if we had to provide input to other organizations, they kind of need a formal relationship, so we can provide the input as IETF. And sometimes we have to send people to participate, and we don't have really the standing to do it if we don't have a liaison relationship. So those are some of the examples we try to kind of pick from when we had to set up a liaison relationship. And as Miria said in the other document, and it's again repeated here, you don't need a liaison relationship to send a liaison statement. You can still send a formal liaison statement without a relationship, and that we made that pretty clear here. Next slide. Okay, the idea is not to figure out what's in here, but we kind of like done like quite a bit of reorg of the text to make it like clear, which it wasn't before. So, and we kind of made sure that, like, you know, it reflects current practice. So next slide. So we are kind of using this text to talk to the liaison managers too. So there's going to be a more, if you want to be involved, you can look at the talk after we present it afterwards over there. And we do have a bunch of open issues that we left out for like version 1 because they probably need like more discussion. So the 0.0 drafts are out, and we sent a call for comments on the architecture discuss list. So please comment on the list. We'd love to hear inputs. Any criticism, anything is good to go, please do it. And we would love to see this adopted as an IAB document in the near future. And yeah, just hit us up. Thank you. Open for questions if anybody has anything. We have 4 minutes to fill. I could sing.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, Andrew, and then
Thanks,
Lucas.
Andrew.
Hi, Andrew Campling. 2 questions. If I recall from the last meeting in Dublin, I think one of the issues that came up a lot was that we're not very good at responding in a timely fashion to some SDOs, and they take non-response as agreement. Apologies, I haven't had a chance to read the drafts. Do the updated documents cover that? Is the first question.
So the answer to that is like, so there is, so as Miria said before, so one of the things is like what we're trying to push is that when we have a liaison manager, like for the relationship, if you have a formal thing, we are kind of going to instruct the liaison managers to respond to it. Like, so whether or not it's an IETF response. One thing that's a lot of the times, right, we cannot respond as the IETF, right? Like, you know, like the leadership doesn't talk for the IETF a lot of the time. So we have to go judge consensus, and it's not always possible in a time frame. So we kind of making this clear, like in documents as well as like stuff we're doing with the managers. But the intent is that the liaison managers will like communicate this back, right? That we got this liaison, and like, you know, kind of communicate the status back to the other organization. So they're not left hanging, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that like we might be able to come up with the response in the time frame, but at least like the status is always
But almost by responding to say that the non-response is not agreement, would even that
correct.
would be
We
good.
got this, we posted it, and like, you know, we may or may not be able to meet this time frame. Mira, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I think this is a problem we have with one specific organization, and we are discussing this separately as well. So this is very general, but like we're looking at this organization, see how to improve our relationship and our communication there.
Okay, and then second question, on one of your last slides, you said one of the open issues was about not treating those sort of statements or those other organizations differently. They had no special place in the IETF process, something like that. Is that something we're thinking about changing? Because I understand that a lot of the other STOs, that's not the case, and we're an outlier in some instances.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
as I
that
said,
one, number 4.
yeah, correct. Like, so I think I talked about this like during the talk itself, right? Like, is that like, if a liaison statement comes in, right, it has like no more weight than a participant in the working group process. Like, I think that's something we want to clarify, that something came in as a liaison statement does not hold any additional weight in our consensus process.
So my question then is, understand that. Are we simply trying to make that clearer to other bodies, or are we thinking that we maybe need to fix that so that we do have a.
We need to fix that, yes.
No.
So we need to fix that, like communicating to the other bodies.
Yeah, yeah,
right?
the
So-
communication we
gonna
need to fix,
change
but
that
we
to make it
cannot
special.
change our
Right,
process.
right. So
We're not gonna make it
we're
special.
not planning to address that and give a special place, just to be clear.
Correct. We are like, what do we say to our managers to communicate that properly to the other bodies? Yes. We will not change it, no.
Lucas.
Hello. So I was skimming the drafts briefly as you were presenting as well. Two things kind of stuck out that I wonder, just open two different things. One is the code of conduct. Are liaisons bound by our IETF code of conduct? I didn't see any mention. I don't know if they are or not. I expect the liaison manager would kind of deal with anything like that, but it maybe would be good to add some text in the document, reference an RFC like 7154 or something along those lines, or make a clear kind of statement that they are exempt from it. I don't know, just an open question. The other one is the security considerations. Something I've been dealing with for the last year is kind of dealing with reports of issues in protocols and or implementations. One of the drafts says like there's no security consideration, basically. I'm wondering if actually we need to make something there, which is if another body was to find a security problem and wanted to report it via a liaison, that's probably not the best route, given that it could be sensitive. It's pretty obvious, right? But maybe like we shouldn't have such a terse security consideration section.
Yeah, both good points, Lucas, right? Like, I think one of them is like the liaison managers, like from the IETF side, are regular IETF participants. I would assume they're bound by the code of conduct and no special mention is necessary. But if you think some text is needed, we can certainly add something just to make it clear. And for the second thing, the security stuff is generally the content of the liaison statement, not really like in the relationship itself. So I'm not sure like what you would add to these RFCs to address that, but we can discuss it as well. Thanks. I don't know if let's
Charles.
up next.
Charles.
Okay, yeah, Charles Eckel. Well, one other thought is maybe in regard to tracking the status of these, like have they been discussed in the working group, or more specifically, if there was an action required, if an action was taken. I haven't seen a way like to update in the tooling. I don't think we have a way to deal with that. Maybe in both the draft and the tooling, that would be a good thing to address.
So absolutely. So as I said, we removed all the tooling details. So it's not in the draft anymore. But we have a long list of things we want to change with the tooling, and I hope we're starting this kind of in the next month or whatever. And one of the set of issues we have is also around how to reply to liaison statement, how to make this more visible, how to remind people about it, how to record that we did reply something, or why we decided to not reply. So this is like kind of a set of issues we want to fix in the tooling. Yes.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Leslie?
Yeah,
is-
Leslie Daigle,
sorry.
and this may be already taken care of, or maybe we should take it offline, but before you chuck the acts as a representative of the Internet Society, under what conditions does the IETF still have liaison relationship with the ITU? Because previously the IETF wrote in on the Internet Society sector membership.
So, yeah, so we did remove two words which say we are managing the liaisons for the IETF and ISOC. I don't think that's what we're doing. I understand this problem, but the way the sentence was phrased, we just removed the for ISOC, but I think you're bringing up a separate topic that we should actually figure out.
Yeah, I think you want to just make sure that all the code still runs.
Thanks, Leslie.
All right. Thank you very much. And now we'll hear a brief update about an actual specific liaison relationship, the W3C. You asked me if I want to share my screen. I don't want to, but I have to.
Right. No one ever wants to do this. Hi, everyone. My name's Martin. I've been here before. I've given an update on the liaison relationship with the W3C in the past. I'm not about to do that here. Next slide, please. So some of you might have noticed a few interesting last call reviews from people who don't often participate in the IETF. These are also very, very good reviews on topics that the IETF doesn't necessarily have a whole lot of depth and experience in. This one here is one where we have a few people who are really highly expert in the area, but it is always good to get extra review, which is the internationalization area. And this person is a long-time participant in the W3C in the internationalization topic. And there's a group at the W3C that does that work. And they have provided this feedback on this draft, which I think is an excellent thing. Next slide. This is part of a thing that we're trialing with a few groups, directorates here, review bodies, they call them, effectively a cross-area review team within the W3C. We have some expertise, they have some expertise, and we're sort of trying to work out how we can best make sure that that expertise is available across the organizations where there are potentially shortcomings or just opportunities for that sort of cross-organization collaboration. So next slide. I believe that these are the sort of areas of expertise that we've identified across the two groups. The IETF has very specifically for the W3C, where they care about HTTP quite a bit. There's an HTTP directorate that is maintained under the art area. Oh no, sorry, it's WIT now. And that group, small group of people that reviews things here, but there is an open offer to the W3C to have work done by that directorate for W3C work. Communication security, networking more generally, and we're generally leaning on the directorate structure for that sort of thing. On their side, they have a number of sort of cross-cutting review groups that have expertise in privacy, accessibility, internationalization, web architecture, those sorts of things. They have a very different process to the one that we're perhaps familiar with, but you will find that if you have a look at the reviews that have come across on last call, they're highly organized. They have issue trackers that track all of the open things that they found, and excellent communication. So I think my sense is that this process is working out pretty well, and we'd like to sort of get some feedback from people as to whether you see these sort of things as being useful. Obviously, this is likely only useful in a very sort of narrow band of the work that we do here at the IETF, but for those people involved in that area, this is something that I think is turning up good results already. I think that's all I had. Olaf.
Thank you. Very interesting. I was wondering, is this in any way formalized, or is this just...
This is just a casual, we know some people across there, they know some people over here, and if you need any information on this one, there's a number of people floating around who sort of can help facilitate that.
Thank you. This was, of course, a leading question.
And I thank you for the prompt.
Mia Kuhlewint here. So we saw one or two of these reviews coming in so far, and they caused a little bit of confusion because people didn't know where they came from. So maybe we can just figure out some kind of like preamble we can put in the email to make this slightly more clear.
Yeah, I think that was probably an example of the folks doing the review weren't really sure what was going on themselves, and so really sure how to communicate the process. But as you saw, the reviews were excellent, and they were well received, and we got some good engagement back and forth on them. So I don't think that's a problem. We get reviews from random people on the internet all the time, and it turns out that sometimes they're really, really good. And so I think that's how that was received, and that kind of worked out well.
Yeah, I mean, people were confused why this were coming in, and then maybe it's also good to clarify that these don't have any special standing.
No, there's
or
no
whatever,
special standing,
right?
no.
But I think it's a good initiative, and let's see where this goes. We can probably create a little bit of not formality, but like kind of record this stuff somewhere so people can look it up or whatever in our tooling, their tooling, whatever. But let's try this first and then see what we do.
Yeah, we're still working through the kinks, as you pointed out. Yep. All right. Thank you.
Oh, I had a question too. I got myself in queue.
Oh, I
Okay,
can't
that's
see
fine.
you.
So I can imagine how, like we have our last calls and we can just flag like, hey, W3C experts, look at this one. Working in the reverse for like the HTTP directorate, for example, is this just a case of you or other folks kind of highlighting like, hey, here's an interesting thing happening in W3C? Is there a list of things that the directorate is just watching all the things going by and flagging, we think we should chime in on this?
This is again one of those things where I think it's going to be down to the people involved in the work to be able to identify that, or those who are around it. So I'm currently sitting on the W3C tag, and the tag sees a lot of the work that goes through the W3C. And so through that opportunity, we can identify some things that maybe the IETF should take a look at. And that's something that we would expect to have happen particularly in the arts and wit area, where that expertise is perhaps valuable to be able to draw upon. I'm highlighting a few things here. We tried to keep the initial list quite short in terms of things we'd like to focus on. But if there's any topics that you think sort of fit within this profile, let me or someone know.
Cool. Yeah, I think it's like, I'm assuming there is a future of the W3C tag where you're not on it. And so in
Yeah,
those,
exactly right.
In those versions, like, how do we make sure that we could still have the flagging or communication?
Yeah, so
the
obviously,
succession of
yeah,
this?
the IAB knows who the liaison contacts are, and so on and so forth.
Thank you.
Mr. York.
Yeah, Dan York. Just curious, what are you doing with the accessibility side of the work that's there? It's an area I'm interested in personally, so I'm just curious.
I'm not aware of anything that's come through the IETF that has very special accessibility requirements that would require that sort of review. But we put it on the list because there is a very strong community there that has that expertise. Yeah.
Cool. I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right. Very good. Oh, Miria? Go for it.
I guess I'm stealing now time from the open mic, but as we're all here, I also noticed that there's a lot of work, or there's some discussion ongoing in W3C about trusted web. Can you say anything about this?
I'm not sure I can do that in 2 minutes, but I think there's a lot of people who are concerned about things like truth and how we determine whether something is or is not corresponding to reality. And this is a big concern on the web. I trust this is a big concern just in society generally. The W3C has a number of initiatives in this area, all of which are sort of struggling to find the scope of the work that they can take on that would be meaningful. Obviously, this is a societal problem, and that's going to be difficult. But there have been a number of sort of mini workshops that are being organized around that. So if anyone has ideas that could contribute to that, come talk to me and I can sort of point you in the right direction of those workshops. Right now, it's in the spitballing phase. So I wouldn't say that there's anything that really needs attention from here.
It might be too early, but do you think there's something that would swap over to the IETF eventually?
This is another thing. Because it's in the spitballing phase, I don't know. There may be some protocols or ideas or whatever that come out of these sorts of things that require some sort of security components or that sort of thing. I personally think that would be a bad idea in some ways, but then we can have that discussion. I think at this point, given that it's so ill-formed, it's probably not something we need to be worried about, but it's something that's coming. And people are going to be very excited about doing these things. You saw the trust.txt discussion in Dispatch earlier this morning, which is related to all of that work. Yeah.
All right. So that's the end of our agenda for today. We don't really have time for open mic, but if there are any particular your hot topics or questions people have, feel free to bring up briefly now, or we can, of course, discuss on any of the various mailing lists we have, or you can come up and chat with us at the end. And again, we will have our in-depth dive into the WSIS +20 process tomorrow, same place, same time. We look forward to having a great discussion there and all learning a little bit more about what's going on in that arena of internet governance stuff. So see you tomorrow, everyone. Thank you all.